you feel that it's critical to have your partner on board with the journey. I'm probably 50-50 on it. I think it depends on the relationship.
But I'd put it as a scale. So they have to be supportive of the idea. They just don't need to be bought in that it's the greatest thing.
It can't be the limiter.
Exactly. And so for me with Hazel, like in our conversation, I know we've brought it up before, was like I was just investing heavily in more businesses. She sat down as like, when are you actually going to invest in the family? To which the first trigger for us was actually, well, hang on, investing is a good thing for the family. We weren't determined on property, shares, or anything. Like, it didn't really matter. It was more like the step one for us was, do we both agree that investing outside of businesses is a good idea? Yes.
The way I view that is that Hazel actually got you on board.
And then you, because we had dinner with Hazel and the girls, I was like, I have to go and do something outside of the business realm. So, yeah, Hazel, similar to you, Hazel and you were the trigger.
Interesting. Very interesting. Circle of influence is a fascinating part on this, because I suspect it's like I hang, or was when I was not, just to be really clarifying here. When I wasn't a business owner, I was spending time with business owners, and inevitably I ended up a business owner because I saw the results they were getting. I looked at the comparison to what I had in my own life, and that is the thing that ultimately led to going, well, I think this is a good idea. Second to that is I know people in property. Like, my parents had flipped and built many properties themselves. We also, like, I was in the building game. I was a plumber and had met many people that were successful with property. My first boss, he was successful through doing his own subdivisions and things like that. So I was very biased to be around and influenced by property investors that when the time came, like, no surprise, guess where my bias was?
Totally.
If I'd have been hanging around people who were day trading, I suspect I would have potentially gone on a different path. Right? So circle of influence is a huge thing when it comes to the type of investor you are and in general where you go in life. But I almost want to look at this in a different way. Once you and Hazel had that very critical conversation of like, it's time to invest, how did you actually get Hazel on board for property? Like, what was the flow in that? Or did she get you on board?
So, and it comes back to the point that I was making, which was like, it's almost like this two-stepped approach, which was doing nothing is not an option. And so we both completely aligned to that. And then the second question was, okay, well, what do we do? And we've had a little bit of a foray in crypto, a little bit of foray in shares, a little bit of foray into other things. And it was like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, what's going to be the best approach? Now, again, business owner, I love a challenge. Anyone who sends me a challenge, I'm in. So first went out and started talking to people that I knew, you included, started reading books, watching videos, trying to understand a little bit more. And I'm like, I think property is going to be the play. So I actually went back as the initiator to say, out of these investment assets, I think property is the key because of these reasons.
Right. And so you built up your reasons, but how did you bring that to Hazel itself? Because I suspect for many people out there that are maybe earlier on in investing and maybe haven't bought an investment property yet, or maybe they've got one or two and they want to be more aggressive and they want to buy more or scale it or do more risky things like developments or I don't know, what else is risky? Crazy stuff. We'll just go with it. But the point being is, did you structure this in like, we have a monthly meeting together? Like, how did you actually create the space in your relationship to go through this and make that decision?
Yeah, so it's a great point. At the start, it was completely unstructured. It was like, as I would learn something, I would share it to her. And then all I created was this pure confusion in the mind. She's like, cool, let's go all in the shares. Cool, let's do property. We can.
Oh, no, houses. You were that guy that was like deep in on Bitcoin and she wasn't there yet and just come across as crazy?
Yeah, totally. And so I was just sharing these things as I was learning. And the problem that I did was I actually just confused the hell out of her. And it was completely my fault because I'm like, I've learned this, I've learned this, I've learned this. And I'm like, well, this is not adding any value. So I went away and I did some research. And then I actually said, let's go out for coffee. And so we went to a cafe and I just said, hey, like, this is what I've done. What are the questions? What do I need to do in order for you to say yay, nay on one of these ideas? And so I just mapped out, this is what I think about property. This is what I think about shares, da, 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 da. And at the end of it, she's like, I think I could buy back into your property concept, right? Because of everything else that she had. Like, she loves shares more than property. And I'm like, cool, like, this is why I think property is the thing. So so originally butchered it. Then I realized that I was butchering it, went and said, cool, I'm going to collate. I'm going to stack all the decks and I'm going to go have a conversation with her, answer all of her questions. And I know the next question is, okay, well, if we do this, what's at risk? What do we have to do? What does it look like? And I said, just give me some time and I'll go and find that out for you now that we're both bought in on the idea of property being the thing. Then I went and did the same thing. I went and researched it, went and found buyer's agents, spoke to people, spoke to yourself, etc., and then played it back. And then I had another friction point, which was paying for advice, which
Do you know, I've always found this odd by you, right? Because you value education so much and buy so many books and courses and things, but there's a resistance in the paying for advice category for you.
for the duo. So for myself, I'm fine with it, right? But the thing is, like, if I pay for advice, I'm not just using my money in this scenario. So in business, it's my money. It's fine. It's no worries at all. In my personal buying books and everything, it's
the ramifications don't feel as big in business, do they?
Totally.
Or it's like, oh, cool, we'll hire someone, not as big a deal, right? Or even like for people that aren't having their own businesses, they might buy a car without necessarily taking the same due diligence. But it's this big purchase thing when it's like potentially spending $500,000 to $1 million, and the repercussions of getting that wrong is a level of seriousness that comes up.
Well, and then the additional layer to that is the personal bias if I can just go and find something. Like, I grew up here and it's always going to do well. And so, like, when I presented the idea of us paying for a buyer's agent, it was met with quite a bit of resistance. Not from me, from the partner.
It can be a hard thing for people to get over as well, right?
Totally. And so that actually took us a little bit to get over. So what I ended up doing was, like, I spoke to buyer's agents, brought her on the calls and got her bought into the idea. And there's no different. Like, she's paid for personal trainers before. She's done courses of nutrition courses. Like, she's paid experts to do the thing because she knows that just reading it out of a book's not going to work, or trying to learn it yourself is the hard way. But it was actually really tough for us to get over that hurdle, to the point that we almost just didn't go into it. And we just thought that we could invest better ourselves. And it was just
I just had to pause you right there. I think that is a massive group of people. There is so many people that hit the friction point either with partner or the education or not willing to pay for advice, and it just turns into the stop, and then they do nothing.
Completely. Because I'm like, if I was buying, so imagine at the time I wasn't with my now wife. If it was just me, easiest money I ever spent. Like, it was just, I wouldn't have blinked an eye. It was just like, yeah, it makes sense, right? Like, I don't have no idea in comparison to a buyer's agent on this, in this regard of buying an investment property. Like, this is almost an insurance policy to me. Like, it's the person's done the thing.
Couldn't agree more. We'll save that for another episode.
So then it was, well, I don't want to go and take a bunch of money from my now wife to go and sink it in unless she's bought in on it, because that's just not what good, in my opinion, that's just not what good partners do.
And if you're buying a house together, you're committing her borrowing power to this as well, right?
Completely. So both of our names were on our first property, and that we did trust and not financial advice and stuff like that later. And so it was like this big consideration, and that just took time. Like, I wanted to buy quick smart, like, money was there, borrowing capacity was there. I'm like, let's just get the thing done. But I had to support her and walk her through, and she had to come on board the other side to say, yes, I'm willing for you to use our money on this. And yes, I'm willing for us to get debt on this. And then it was game on. Then it was like, like within a day, it's like, bam. I'm like, before she could change her mind, like, let's just go. And then the ramifications, dude, she's so bought in. She's like, why aren't we buying one now?
There's an interesting effect. I'll share, we'll go into that maybe a little bit later. Actually, I'll just mention it now. Is like, I'll go through, actually, no, I'll mention it in sequence. I'll go through me and Bianca a little bit here, and then we'll talk about once you get some wins on the board. I actually experienced a little bit of resistance from Bianca. I did. And I'll look at it and say that I find in my own relationship, and I know this is true for you as well, and I know this is true for many others, is what happens when a new idea comes into it. And this doesn't mean just like property. This could be moving house, having kids, changing location, whatever it is.
Jobs, etc.
Changing jobs, going into business. Someone's the instigator. Always someone is the instigator. It is very, very rare that both people came to the same conclusion at the same time.
Yep.
So what generally happens is one person will go, hey, I think X is a good idea. We should do this. And what can occur in many cases is resistance. Right? The other person isn't had that experience you have, so they don't feel the same way about it.
Yep.
So for myself, I've found in my relationship with Bianca that I'm naturally always thinking a few years ahead than she is. Right? People have this tendency to think in certain time frames, and I find that for myself, I'm continually thinking like 2 to 3 years down the road. I don't know why. It's just wired in now. And for many people, they're just kind of trying to get through their day or week. Now, there's nothing inherently good or bad about that, but you can see that if I'm thinking 3 years ahead and Bianca's thinking 3 weeks ahead, we might have very different opinions on things. Anyway, point being is that I was the instigator on this and brought it to the table, and there was some resistance, there was some fear, there was some uncertainty, and there was definitely like a stop point of how do we progress from here on whether we're going to do it or not.
Interesting.
All right, now shall I share how we got through it? We should
Please
just end the
don't
episode
tell me the
here.
answer is brute force.
No. So I looked at a few things here that at the time I didn't realize what I was doing. I will say that it's only down the road that I realized the skills I was using here of influence.
Yep.
But there was a few here where the first thing was I'm like, well, have we thought through what we want retirement to look like? Like we don't actually have a plan or anything down the road for like what's going to happen next. And if we do nothing, who knows what we're going to get?
Yeah.
So are we going to get to our 80s and be regretful that we didn't take advantage of these opportunities today? And I also had a bit of a silver bullet you didn't have, which is that I'd already bought a house and done well on it. And I had the whole, look, we bought this house 5 years ago and look what's happened. What if we bought 2 at that time? Can you see how different our financial position would be? And I'm like, what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years? Do you think that's not going to happen again? Right. So there was already this little bit of proof in our lives for us personally, but of course we could have acknowledged other people and seen what's happened. Right. And at the time, just remember, there was plenty of reasons why property shouldn't be a good investment. Like there was the Banking Royal Commission, pandemics, bank scandals, everything. Right? All kinds of, the world was falling apart for some other reason at this point. Like the continual reason not to do it was there. Anyway, the other side of this is that I kind of put 2 things in place where it's like we actually decided to read a book together, which was Debt Millionaire by George Antone.
Great.
So I said, we're both going to get educated on this. And I think this is a critical point if you do want to get your partner involved. I don't think it can just be on your influence that you get a buy-in. I think you have to create external measures either through education, books, other people that have been successful. Like you have to have proof that this is working for other people. It's not just your idea if you want a really solid buy-in. So we read Debt Millionaire. I'd already read it, but Bianca had read it after and I read it again. And after reading that and the body of proof we had, it was very easy for us to go in with the idea of we're going to try this out. Now, I also had a little thing I used here. I said, look, if we do this and it doesn't work, and let's say we lose 100 grand, we're young enough where we can take a risk somewhere else.
Yep.
Like now's the time to do these things because we're, in our 30s, where if we do this in our 60s, that's where the real damage is done. But I go the other side of this, if this pays off, like this is an incredibly powerful pathway for us to achieve the goals we have in our life.
Yep.
So that was the setup for myself.
All right, fellow property investor. If you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.